Shalom Uvracha to all. Hope everybody had the most wonderful Pesach, Be'ezras Hashem. We jump back into our study of Likutei Halachos, trying to go through the inner meaning of some of the Halachos in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, as we have been really trying to work through the Seder Hayom of our day, beginning with learning a lot about waking up and what the nighttime is, and now we've moved along through the Halachos of Netilas Yadayim, and we've been discussing Tzitzis and why Tzitzis are so crucial in the morning as part of the broader process of having gone to sleep and woken up and poured water on our hands, the bechina, the aspect of the negel vaser of the Netilas Yadayim, and what all that is. And the way that we're understanding it in the context of Likutei Halachos, Hilchos Netilas Yadayim Shachris Halacha Dalid, is that sleep is an aspect of bittul, to nullify oneself to the higher realms beyond. And to come back down into this world is the necessity of creating vessels for that great light that is upon a person when a person rises into a deeper state of consciousness that close down their functionality in this world, the aspect, like we learned, of closing one's eyes from the chezudai alma, looking away from the illusion of this particular experience of reality in olam hazeh, and instead to connect oneself to the light of emunah, to that light of rising above the seichel, to that light of going into a higher place and drawing down, like we learned, to the waters from that place, the waters of faith, the waters of the tachlis, of coming to realize that really ein od milvado, really everything is just Hashem, and to recognize the essence of Torah and mitzvahs as being the ability to live with a remembrance of that reality to the extent that we can. And that's the whole struggle in this world. But how do we build vessels? So we learned in the previous message that ultimately the way that we create the vessels for that great light that we experience when we're sleeping, that aspect of rising above our seichel, above our intellect and the limitations of our standard experience of reality, is to draw it down into vessels. And that's what tzitzis are. We learned that the garments are the filterage, so to speak, like the filtering system that brings all of the light that we access in sleeping, and it brings it down into the vessels, into garments, so that we can interact, that we can access them, and that we can connect to them. We learned that that's what tzitzis are. Tzitzis are the aspect of the tcheles. The tcheles is damel yam, yam damel rakia, rakia damel kisei hakabod. Tzitzis is like a portal that brings us to that place, but it makes it very, very accessible. It brings it down into the olam hamaisa, and it enables us to live in a state of remembering, like the pasuk says, "Re'isem oisai." You shall look at the tzitzis uzechartem, and you shall constantly live in a state of remembrance. And that's why, of course, we're putting tzitzis on in the beginning of the day, shortly after having woken up, because the tzitzis represent, in terms of there being a mitzvah related to and connected to and literally connected to and hanging upon the garment. So they represent this aspect of bringing down that great light down into garments. So Reb Nosson continues over here, and he says that this is the same aspect of Tefillin as well. He brings where the Gemara in Kiddushin tells us, based on the pasuk ulizikaron beineinecha, that there's a connection between the mitzvah of tefillin and tzitzis. They are hukshu. They're connected one to the other, and all of tefillin is all of the Torah rather is connected to tefillin, and that's really what the Gemara is telling us. Ulizikaron beineinecha lamantia Torah Hashem beficha. But the pasuk continues, and it says that the entire Torah is connected to tefillin. And we find, interestingly enough, in this pasuk, the word zikaron comes up again. Reb Nosson explains that the tefillin represent moichin gedolim, represent incredibly vast and lofty and elevated and expansive ways of experiencing this world. That's what the tefillin are. The tefillin on the yad, the tefillin particularly on the head, the tefillin shel rosh, that represents moichin, that represents consciousness, that represents living in a state of emunah, that we've talked about, but tzaddik be'emunasa yichya, to really live with faith and to live plugged into that deeper experience of reality, to be conscious of it. That's what tefillin are. Tefillin are the consciousness. So Reb Nosson says, what's the connection between tzitzis and tefillin? Is exactly this. Tzitzis represents the garments, and the tefillin represent the light. Tefillin is the manifestation, is the representative element of that moichin, of that emunah that we experience during bittul of sleep. Tzitzis is the garment, and the tefillin represent this incredible R that we're able to bring down into the garment that we have created. So Reb Nosson says that's why, in a deeper level, the tzitzis comes before the tefillin. Because the tefillin is the R needs to settle down into ready-made vessels. So it's true in Echanami, it's true that the bittul of sleep comes before the tzitzis, because that's the primordial reshimu. A person has to have the residual element, like they had to have first contacted that realm. That remains true, and that's always the case. However, if we are to experience the manifestation of that light in a person's own life in this world, which is the tefillin, they first have to create the kalim. They first have to create the vessels, and that's Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. The Yira comes first, where a person has created the vessels, a person has done the work. It's exactly the avodah that we're doing now, in between Pesach and Shavuos, through the days of Sfira, every day building another vessel, working on another midah, being conscious of our actual lived experience, not just of what things are ideally, but trying our best to manifest that ideal within our experience of this world. Says Reb Nosson, that's what the tzitzis are. Tzitzis are the vessels, and then after putting on tzitzis, so then we take the tefillin and we put them on our arms, or we put them and we put them on our head, and what the tefillin are is exactly this: is this concretized symbol for the zikaron that we mentioned in the context of tzitzis, of re'isem oiso zachartem. That very same word, uzachartem, shows up again in the context of tefillin, like the pasuk tells us, ulu zikaron beinenecha, that it should be zikaron, it should be there, beinenecha, aligned with our eyes, aligned with our mind, to give us the eyes that are able to, just like we experienced in the time of bittul being asleep, where our eyes are closed from looking at this world and being convinced by its independence and being convinced by physicality that that's really all there is to reality. But ultimately, the tefillin enable our eyes to open, like it says by Adam and Chava, and Rashi tells us over there that they became enlightened, illuminated, and that's what the tefillin are. It enables us to take the zikaron that tzitzis serve to filter, and it brings it down into our lives in a very real way. That's the interconnection between tefillin and tzitzis, and why tzitzis comes first before tefillin.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני